The laugh tore through Judge Judy's courtroom like a slap across America's face. Madison Whitmore, 24-year-old daughter of one of Manhattan's most feared defense attorneys, threw her head back and laughed out loud, a sharp, mocking, theatrical laugh, after Judge Judy calmly asked her to remove her oversized Gucci sunglasses inside the courtroom. The cameras caught every single second of it. Every flash of her perfectly whitened teeth. Every condescending tilt of her chin. Every contemptuous flick of her wrist as she finally pulled the sunglasses down to the tip of her nose, peered over them at America's most feared television judge, and smirked like she was looking at hired help. What Madison didn't know was that those few seconds of laughter would become the most replayed clip in courtroom television history. What Madison didn't know was that her father's $40 million fortune, his Park Avenue law firm, his 3 decades of buying off judges and burying victims, would be reduced to ashes within 6 weeks of that single moment of arrogance. And what Madison absolutely did not know was that Judge Judy had spent the entire previous night reading a sealed file that her father had paid $250,000 to bury forever. Madison had walked into that courtroom looking less like a defendant and more like a celebrity arriving at a Manhattan gala. She clutched an $18,000 Hermes Birkin handbag against her chest like a designer weapon, the kind of bag that costs more than most American families earn in 3 months. She wore a $4,200 Versace blazer over a silk camisole, diamond studs the size of blueberries glittering in her ears, and a Cartier watch that her father had gifted her on her 23rd birthday for surviving another year of being misunderstood. A black-suited chauffeur had dropped her off in a midnight blue Bentley Bentayga right at the courthouse entrance, and her 2 best friends, both daughters of Manhattan financial executives, had followed her inside to film the entire appearance for her Instagram stories. Madison had 340,000 followers waiting to see her destroy this old TV judge. Her father, Richard Whitmore, senior partner at the legendary Park Avenue firm of Whitmore, Sterling and Associates, had been arguing cases in front of the United States Supreme Court since before Judge Judy had her own television show. Madison had been arrested 3 separate times in her young life, for assault, for drug possession, and for a hit-and-run that nearly killed a delivery driver, and every single charge had been dropped, expunged, or quietly settled before her court date. To Madison, courtrooms were not places of consequence. Courtrooms were places where her father wrote checks and made problems disappear. That is exactly why what came out of her mouth next would end her freedom forever. When Judge Judy asked her one more time, with the patience of a woman who had been disrespected by entitled brats for 35 years, to please remove the sunglasses and address the court properly, Madison leaned forward in her chair, looked Judge Judy directly in the eyes, and delivered the 8 words that would detonate her entire life. "Honey, my dad eats judges like you for breakfast. You should know your place before you embarrass yourself on national television." The silence that followed was so complete, so absolutely suffocating, that you could hear the air conditioning vents humming above the bench. Judge Judy did not react. Did not blink. Did not move a single muscle. She did not speak for 11 full seconds. The court reporter's fingers froze above her stenotype machine. The bailiff's hand drifted instinctively toward his belt. The audience held its collective breath. Madison's smirk wavered for just half a second as she began to sense, somewhere deep in the most primal corner of her mind, that something had gone catastrophically wrong. What you are about to witness is the most devastating courtroom collapse in television history. In under 90 seconds from that moment, Judge Judy would deliver the maximum possible sentence, refer the case to federal prosecutors, and trigger an investigation that would dismantle a $40 million law firm in 6 weeks. The clip would rack up 187 million views in 72 hours, trend worldwide for 9 consecutive days, and force the American Bar Association to launch the largest federal corruption investigation into a single law firm in the past decade. Madison Whitmore would walk out of that courtroom in handcuffs. Her father would be indicted on 23 counts. Her mother would file for divorce within the month. And Sarah Chin, the single mother whose life Madison had destroyed, would finally be heard. Before we show you the exact moment Judge Judy turned this trust fund princess into the most hated woman in America, smash that like button if you believe nobody, not even a millionaire's daughter, should be above the law. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss the moment when entitled brats finally face real consequences. Trust me, what Judge Judy reveals about Madison's hidden criminal record in the next few minutes will leave you absolutely speechless. To understand the magnitude of what was about to unfold in that courtroom, you need to know exactly who Sarah Chin was, because she was not just another plaintiff in another small claims case. Sarah Chin was 31 years old, a pediatric nurse who worked grueling overnight shifts in the cancer ward of a children's hospital in Queens, holding the hands of dying children at 3 a.m. while her own daughters slept in a tiny two-bedroom apartment 30 blocks away. She had been born in Taiwan and immigrated to America at the age of 12, learning English by watching American sitcoms and working 3 jobs through nursing school. 2 years ago, her husband David, a construction worker she had met at a community center English class, had been killed when scaffolding collapsed at a Manhattan job site. He left her with a folded American flag from his Marine Corps Reserve Service, a small life insurance payout that barely covered his funeral, and twin 6-year-old daughters named Lily and Grace who still cried for their daddy every single night before bed. Sarah had not slept a full 8 hours since the day her husband died. She survived on coffee, prayer, and the relentless love of 2 little girls who needed her to keep going. For 4 years, Sarah had saved every spare dollar, skipping lunches, repairing her shoes with electrical tape, refusing every birthday gift her sister tried to give her, to buy a used 2014 Honda Civic with 87,000 miles on it. That little silver car was her entire world. It drove her to her overnight shifts at the hospital. It carried Lily and Grace to school every morning. It took her daughters to the playground on her one day off each week. It was the only thing standing between her family and complete collapse. Then one Tuesday morning at 3:14 a.m., while Sarah was inside the hospital comforting a 7-year-old leukemia patient, Madison Whitmore ran a red light at the intersection of 48th and 9th Avenue at 60 miles per hour after leaving a Manhattan nightclub with a blood alcohol level nearly 3 times the legal limit. She slammed her father's Bentley into Sarah's parked Honda Civic with such violent force that the Civic was launched 15 feet down the street, crumpled into an unrecognizable heap of twisted metal. Madison did not get out of her car. Madison did not call 911. Madison called her father. Within 22 minutes, a man in a black suit who introduced himself only as a family representative arrived at the scene, paid the responding officer's supervisor in cash, and made the entire incident vanish from the official police record. The next morning, Sarah finished her shift, walked outside to drive home to her daughters, and found nothing where her car had been. 3 days later, she received a hand-delivered letter from a Park Avenue law firm offering her exactly $800 to resolve any potential disputes, a settlement offer that was less than 10% of her car's value, wrapped in a chilling warning that if she refused, the Whitmore family attorneys would pursue aggressive legal remedies that may result in significant financial consequences for you and your dependents. For the next 8 months, Sarah took Ubers she could not afford to her overnight shifts, missed 11 days of work because she could not arrange transportation in time, came within 9 days of being evicted from her apartment, and watched her daughters cry when she had to tell them. She could not take them to school anymore. Judge Judy was her absolute last hope. Now you need to understand exactly what kind of person had been allowed to do this to Sarah and her daughters, because Madison Whitmore was not an accident. Madison Whitmore was a 24-year-old monster carefully manufactured by 24 years of Manhattan elite wealth, raised by a rotating staff of nannies in a $12 million Upper East Side penthouse where her parents were rarely home and consequences were a foreign concept. Her father, Richard Whitmore, was a ruthless senior partner at the legendary Park Avenue firm of Whitmore, Sterling and Associates, a man who had built a 30-year career and a $40 million personal fortune by getting wealthy criminals acquitted on technicalities, by intimidating witnesses, by paying off prosecutors, and by building one of the most aggressive legal fixer operations in the city. Madison had been quietly arrested 4 times before her 24th birthday. At age 17, she crashed her father's Porsche into the front window of a Lower East Side delicatessen while driving drunk on champagne, injuring 2 employees. Charges dropped within 48 hours. At age 19, she slapped a waiter at a Soho restaurant so hard she dislocated his jaw because he had served her white wine that was, in her words, served too cold for any civilized human being. Charges dropped. At age 21, she was caught with over an ounce of cocaine at a Hampton summer party. Charges dropped. At age 23, she sued her own grandmother in civil court for emotional damages because her grandmother refused to let her access her trust fund 3 years early. Every single time, Richard Whitmore made it disappear. The pattern was always the same. The fixer arrived. The victim received a tiny settlement offer wrapped in a legal threat. The official record was sanitized. Madison walked free. Since 2019 alone, internal records would later reveal that Madison Whitmore had personally been responsible for 47 separate incidents involving property damage, physical assault, or motor vehicle crimes. Not a single one of those 47 victims had ever made it to a courtroom. Not one. Daddy's lawyers buried every single one of them under threats, NDAs, and predatory microsettlements. Madison's Instagram, the one she was so excited to film her Judge Judy victory for, was a public museum of her contempt. Photos of her on yachts in St. Tropez, captions like "rules are for poor people, nail polish, and some of us were just born better, woman shrugging, and daddy's money is the best money." She had walked into Judge Judy's courtroom that morning believing this was nothing more than a publicity stunt, a chance to humiliate a TV judge, get clipped going viral, and turn the whole thing into branded content for her 340,000 followers. What Madison did not know, what she could not possibly have known, was that 3 weeks earlier, an anonymous paralegal inside her father's own law firm, a 28-year-old woman who had spent 2 sleepless years drowning in the moral weight of covering up Madison's crimes, had walked into a FedEx office and overnight shipped a sealed manila envelope directly to Judge Judy's chambers. Inside that envelope was documentation of 3 specific incidents Richard Whitmore had buried, including the 2022 hit-and-run that had left a 34-year-old delivery driver named Marcus Davis permanently paralyzed from the waist down. Madison had no idea that the next 90 seconds would not only end her freedom, but expose a cover-up so massive it would unravel her father's entire 30-year legal career. The doors of Judge Judy's courtroom swung open exactly 12 minutes after the case had been scheduled to begin, and Madison Whitmore strolled in like she owned the building. She was chewing pink bubblegum loud enough to be heard 3 rows back. Wireless AirPods were jammed in both her ears, the faint thump of bass leaking out into the silent chamber. Her oversized Gucci sunglasses remained firmly on her face despite the fact that she was now indoors under bright fluorescent courtroom lighting. She carried her $18,000 Birkin handbag swinging from her right wrist like a designer weapon, deliberately bumping it against the wooden railing as she sauntered toward the defendant's table without a single hint of apology for her late arrival. Her 2 best friends, Brittany and Chloe, both daughters of Manhattan financial executives, slid into the front row of the gallery and immediately raised their iPhones, recording her every move for the TikTok content Madison had promised them all morning. The bailiff cleared his throat sharply and instructed Madison to take her seat. Madison ignored him. He repeated the instruction. Madison kept walking, examining her freshly manicured nails. He told her a 3rd time, his voice now carrying real authority, and only then did Madison roll her eyes behind her sunglasses, drop her Birkin onto the defendant's table with a deliberate thud, and lower herself into the chair like she was settling into a spa lounger. Across the courtroom, Sarah Chin sat perfectly still in the plaintiff's chair. She was wearing her clean but visibly worn light blue nursing scrubs because she had come directly from a 14-hour overnight shift at the Children's Hospital. In her trembling hands she clutched a single beige folder containing every single receipt, every police report, every threatening letter from the Whitmore lawyers, and 3 photographs of her twin daughters Lily and Grace standing in front of their school. She had not slept in 22 hours. Her eyes were red. Her hands would not stop shaking. She did not look at Madison. She did not need to. She could feel the contempt radiating across the courtroom like heat from an open furnace. Judge Judy waited. She did not speak immediately. She watched Madison settle in, watched the gum chewing, watched the AirPods, watched the sunglasses, and made no expression at all. Then, with the calm professional patience of a woman who had been disrespected in 1,000 different ways across 35 years on the bench, she leaned forward and spoke. "Miss Whitmore. Please remove your sunglasses." Madison let out a small theatrical sigh, lifted the sunglasses with 2 fingers, and slid them slowly to the top of her head. "Miss Whitmore. Please remove your AirPods." Madison rolled her eyes so hard the entire audience could see the whites. She plucked the AirPods out one at a time and dropped them into her Birkin without breaking eye contact with Judge Judy. Then she added, in a voice loud enough to carry to every camera in the room, "Fine. But make this quick. I have a lunch reservation at Le Bernardin at 1:30, and I will not be late." The gasp that traveled through the audience was audible. Even the bailiff exchanged a startled look with the court reporter. Brittany and Chloe in the front row covered their mouths and laughed silently behind their phones. Sarah Chen flinched as if she had been struck. Madison did not wait to be asked for her opening statement. She launched into a fully rehearsed monologue she had clearly been practicing for days. "Look, Your Honor, this whole thing is ridiculous. This person's car was basically a piece of trash anyway. It was 12 years old. It had 80-something thousand miles on it. It probably wasn't even worth $800 on a generous day. Honestly, between you and me, I did her a favor. Now she has an excuse to upgrade from that disgusting Honda to something that doesn't embarrass the entire neighborhood." She glanced at Sarah and pulled a mocking impression of Sarah's accent, drawing out her vowels in a cruel imitation of an Asian inflection. "She comes in here with her little folder, her sad little story, you know. Some of us were just born to drive Bentleys, and some people were born to drive Hondas. That is just how the world works. I cannot apologize for being successful." Sarah's hands trembled so violently the folder began to shake. Her eyes filled with tears she was desperately trying not to let fall. Judge Judy's voice cut through the courtroom with deceptive calm. "Miss Whitmore. In this courtroom, we use names. Mrs. Chen has a name. Use it." Madison threw her head back and laughed. "Mrs. Chen. Happy now, Judge?" Her tone dripped with such open condescension that even her own friends in the gallery stopped recording for a half-second. Then Judge Judy began the questioning that the audience would later realize was the single most surgical legal trap ever set on television. "Miss Whitmore. What is your current occupation?" Madison shrugged. "I do not have one. I do not need one." "What is your source of income?" "My father provides for me. Generously." "Miss Whitmore, what is the current status of your driving record?" Madison did not hesitate for even a moment. "Spotless. Completely clean. I am an excellent driver." Each answer landed in the air with the soft, deadly weight of a noose tightening around her own neck. The audience could feel it. The court reporter could feel it. Sarah, looking up for the first time, could feel it. The only person in that courtroom who could not feel the trap closing was Madison Whitmore herself. Then came the question that would end her life as she knew it. Judge Judy folded her hands, leaned forward slightly, and asked in a voice barely above conversational, "Miss Whitmore. Do you understand the seriousness of what brought you here today?" Madison threw back her head and laughed again, louder this time, performative, designed for the cameras. "Honestly, Judge? No. Because my dad eats judges like you for breakfast. He has argued in front of the United States Supreme Court. You are a television personality. You should know your place before you embarrass yourself on national television. This whole thing is a joke. Then she turned her face directly toward the main courtroom camera and smirked, holding the smirk for the lens, certain she had just delivered the line that would make her viral and famous and untouchable. The silence that followed lasted 11 full seconds. Judge Judy did not move a single muscle. She did not blink. She did not breathe visibly. The court reporter's fingers froze above her stenotype. The bailiff's hand drifted slowly toward his belt. The HVAC system hummed faintly above the bench, suddenly the loudest sound in the entire room. Madison's smirk held for the first 3 seconds. Then it began to falter at second 5. By second 8, her eyes had begun to dart sideways toward her friends in the gallery, searching for reassurance that was no longer there. Brittany had lowered her phone. Chloe had gone pale. By second 10, Madison's lips had parted slightly, and somewhere in the deepest, most primal corner of her brain, the first warning signal had finally begun to scream that she had made a catastrophic, irreversible mistake. What Madison did not know was that Judge Judy had spent 35 years on the bench waiting for someone exactly like her to walk into her courtroom. And the sealed file sitting in the top right drawer of Judge Judy's bench was about to send Madison Whitmore to prison. If you are loving watching this entitled millionaire's daughter realize she just made the worst mistake of her life, smash that like button right now and let me know in the comments, should rich kids who think they are above the law finally face real consequences? Subscribe for more moments where Judge Judy absolutely demolishes entitled brats who think their family money makes them untouchable. Now back to the destruction. The 11 seconds of silence ended when Judge Judy finally moved. She did not raise her voice. She did not slam her gavel. She simply leaned forward an inch, folded her hands on the bench, and spoke in a voice so low, so controlled, so absolutely lethal that every single person in that courtroom felt the temperature drop 10 degrees. Miss Whitmore, I am so glad you mentioned your father. Because I would like to talk about him too. Madison's smirk evaporated like steam off hot pavement. Judge Judy reached into the top right drawer of her bench, pulled out a thick manila folder nearly 2 inches deep, and laid it down in front of her with the slow deliberate weight of a guillotine being lowered into position. Madison's eyes locked onto that folder. Her mouth opened slightly. The pink bubblegum she had been chewing all morning fell out of her mouth and landed on her $4,200 Versace blazer. She did not notice. Let us begin with your driving record. The one you just told this court, under oath, was spotless. Judge Judy opened the folder and began reading aloud, her voice carrying across a courtroom so silent you could hear the pages turning. March 2019. Driving under the influence on the West Side Highway. Charge dismissed. November 2020. Driving under the influence in the Hamptons after striking a parked vehicle. Charge dismissed. June 2021. Reckless endangerment after driving 94 miles per hour through a school zone in Greenwich. Charge dismissed. August 2021. Second reckless endangerment charge after a road rage incident on the FDR. Charge dismissed. February 2022. Leaving the scene of an accident on the Long Island Expressway. Charge dismissed. April 2023. Third driving under the influence on the Brooklyn Bridge. Charge dismissed. Judge Judy looked up slowly, removed her reading glasses, and stared directly into Madison's eyes. Tell me, Miss Whitmore. Did you forget about these 6 incidents, or did you simply assume I would not find them? Madison's mouth opened and closed twice. No words came out. In the gallery, Brittany and Chloe had finally lowered their iPhones. Brittany's hand was shaking. Chloe was already typing frantically into her phone, presumably texting her father. But Judge Judy was not finished. She was barely getting started. Now let us talk about the pattern, Miss Whitmore. Because what I have in this folder is not just your 6 expunged charges. What I have is a comprehensive list compiled by my research team over the past 72 hours. Since January 2019, you have been personally connected to 47 separate incidents involving property damage, vehicular collisions, or physical assault. She slid a stapled document forward. 47, Miss Whitmore. 47 different human beings whose lives you damaged. And in every single one of those 47 cases, the victim received the exact same template letter from Whitmore, Sterling, and Associates. The exact same predatory microsettlement. The exact same threat to destroy them financially if they pursued justice. She lifted 3 pages from the folder. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes. 68 years old. Grocery store cashier in Yonkers. You sideswiped her car in a parking lot in 2020. You offered her $400. Mr. James Patterson. 20-year-old college student at Hunter. You ran over his bicycle in 2021 and broke his collarbone. You offered him $600. Mrs. Angela Reyes. Pediatric nurse, just like Mrs. Chin sitting right here. You backed your Bentley into her driver's side door in 2022. You offered her $700. Judge Judy set the pages down. Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire courtroom. You do not have a driving problem, Miss Whitmore. You have a humanity problem. Sarah Chen was openly crying now. The bailiff had taken a half-step closer to Madison's chair. Madison herself had begun to shake, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the edge of the defendant's table so hard her knuckles had gone white. And then, Miss Whitmore, there is this. Judge Judy reached into the folder one more time and produced a sealed manila envelope, the kind used for sensitive legal documents. She held it up so the cameras could see it clearly. This was sent to me 3 weeks ago by someone inside your father's law firm. A young woman who had spent the past 2 years drowning in the moral weight of covering up your crimes. A young woman who could not sleep at night anymore. A young woman who finally walked into a FedEx office and did the bravest thing she has ever done in her life. Judge Judy opened the envelope. Marcus Davis. 34 years old. Delivery driver for an independent courier service. Father of 3 children, a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an 18-month-old. On the night of October 14, 2022, you struck him with your father's Bentley while he was crossing 23rd Street on his bicycle. You were driving with a blood alcohol level of 0.19. He was thrown 42 feet. His spine was severed at the L2 vertebra. He has been paralyzed from the waist down for the past 3 years and 7 months. Madison's face had drained of all color. Your father's fixer arrived at the scene before the ambulance. He paid the responding officer $8,000 in cash. He bribed the emergency room intake nurse to misfile the toxicology report. And 4 months later, he visited Marcus Davis in his rehabilitation facility and offered him $50,000 and a non-disclosure agreement so airtight it has prevented his family from speaking publicly about what happened to him for 3 full years. Judge Judy's voice cracked with controlled rage. Marcus Davis's family has been on Medicaid for the past 3 years, Miss Whitmore. His wife had to quit her job to become his full-time caregiver. His 9-year-old son helps lift him out of bed in the morning before going to school. And you have been posting yacht photos with the caption "Rules are for poor people." Madison shattered. She broke into uncontrollable sobs, her mascara running down her face in long black streaks, her makeup melting like a wax figure left out in the sun. You cannot use that, she screamed, her voice cracking into hysteria. That is privileged. That is privileged information. My father will sue you. My father will destroy you. You cannot. Judge Judy did not let her finish. The hammer came down. Your father is not here, sweetheart. And privilege ends where felony obstruction of justice begins. Then came the sentence that ended Madison Whitmore's life as she knew it. This court is referring your case to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office for immediate criminal prosecution on the following charges: vehicular assault, leaving the scene of an accident, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and perjury, because you lied to this court under oath about your driving record exactly 12 minutes ago. I am awarding Mrs. Sarah Chin the maximum amount allowable in this small claims jurisdiction. $10,000 in damages plus full legal fees. Furthermore, this entire whistleblower file, your testimony, and all supporting documentation are being forwarded immediately to the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, because the 2019 dismissal involved a sitting judge in Westchester County who appears on this firm's hidden payment ledger. And finally, I am formally recommending that the New York State Bar Association open a full ethics investigation into your father, Mr. Richard Whitmore. She paused. Her eyes locked onto Madison one final time. Bailiff. Take her into custody. Right now. Madison Whitmore collapsed. She slid out of her chair and onto the courtroom floor, her $18,000 Birkin spilling its contents across the carpet, her sobs turning into screams as the bailiff moved in with handcuffs. Daddy. Somebody call Daddy. Daddy, please, Daddy. Sarah Chin put her face into her hands and wept silently, not tears of triumph, but tears of pure, exhausted, 8-month overdue vindication. The audience rose to its feet in spontaneous applause that lasted nearly a full minute. In 90 seconds, Judge Judy had done what 47 victims and 5 years of cover-ups could not. She had brought Madison Whitmore to justice. But the destruction of the Whitmore empire had only just begun. The clip went viral before Madison Whitmore had even finished being processed at the Manhattan Detention Complex. Within 4 hours of the episode airing on national television, the 90-second clip of Judge Judy delivering her devastating sentence had exploded across TikTok, racking up 12 million views before the sun had even set. By the next morning, the numbers had crossed every imaginable threshold. Within 24 hours, 87 million views across every major social media platform. Within 72 hours, an absolutely staggering 187 million views, making it the single most watched courtroom moment in the entire history of the internet. The clip was trending as the #1 video in 23 different countries, from Brazil to Japan to the United Kingdom to South Africa. 3 different hashtags shot to the top of global Twitter trending charts within the same 6-hour window. Hashtag maximum sentence instantly became the rallying cry for working-class Americans who had spent their entire lives watching wealthy people escape consequences. Hashtag Judge Judy Justice trended for 9 straight days, accumulating over 14 million tweets. And the most savage hashtag of them all, hashtag Daddy Can't Save You, was used over 23 million times in the first week alone, with users tagging it onto every story they had ever heard of a rich kid who had finally faced the consequences of their actions. The destruction of Madison's online empire happened with breathtaking speed. The 340,000 Instagram followers she had been so proud of, the audience she had been so excited to perform for, turned on her with the ferocity of a wounded animal. Within 8 hours, every single one of her recent posts had been buried under tens of thousands of hateful comments. Her yacht photos. Her champagne brunches. Her rules are for poor people caption that had now been screenshotted and circulated to nearly 500 million people worldwide. The harassment became so unmanageable, so relentless, so psychologically overwhelming that her family's public relations team deleted her entire Instagram account within 18 hours of the episode airing. But the internet does not forget. Screenshots of every single one of her captions, every single one of her smug photos, every single one of her cruel comments had already been preserved and weaponized by millions of strangers. Brittany and Chloe, the 2 friends who had been recording her from the gallery for TikTok content, were both publicly identified by internet sleuths within 36 hours. Both girls were fired from their prestigious Manhattan internships within 48 hours, one from a hedge fund and the other from a fashion magazine, with both companies issuing public statements distancing themselves from the women who had laughed while a single mother was being mocked on national television. Meanwhile, a complete stranger named Patricia Owens, a 52-year-old retired schoolteacher in Phoenix who had watched the episode and wept for Sarah Chin, set up a GoFundMe with the simple title "Justice for Sarah and Her Daughters." Within 6 days, that GoFundMe had raised $487,000 from over 31,000 individual donors across all 50 states. Madison Whitmore's personal destruction unfolded with the relentless speed of a building collapse. She spent the first 11 days in a holding cell at the Manhattan Detention Complex while her father's frantic legal team attempted bail hearing after bail hearing, all of which were denied because of the seriousness of the federal charges and the obvious flight risk represented by her family's wealth. Within 2 weeks, she was formally indicted on 7 federal charges, including vehicular assault, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to obstruct justice, perjury, witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and racketeering as a co-conspirator with her father's law firm. The viral video had given courage to victims who had spent years too terrified to speak. 3 of the original 47 victims on Judge Judy's list filed civil lawsuits within the first month. The grocery store cashier from Yonkers, the Hunter College student, the nurse from Queens. Each one represented by attorneys who had reached out to them for free after seeing the courtroom footage. But the most devastating lawsuit came from Marcus Davis, the paralyzed delivery driver and father of 3. His family filed a $40 million wrongful concealment lawsuit against Madison personally and against her father's entire law firm, alleging that the cover-up of his accident had directly caused 3 years of preventable suffering, lost wages, and medical complications. Madison was eventually sentenced to 4 years in a New York State prison, eligible for parole after 18 months. Her $14 million trust fund was frozen by the court pending full restitution to all 47 victims. Her mother, Patricia Whitmore, who had quietly endured 27 years of marriage to Richard Whitmore, filed for divorce 11 days after the verdict, citing what she called in court papers unbearable shame and irreparable damage to my own reputation. Madison Whitmore walked into prison having lost her freedom, her family, her wealth, her followers, her friends, and even her last name, since her mother filed paperwork to revert to her maiden name within 30 days of filing for divorce. But the destruction did not stop with Madison. The man who had built his entire career on telling people he ate judges for breakfast was about to learn what it felt like to be eaten alive. Richard Whitmore's empire collapsed even faster than his daughter's. The American Bar Association launched formal disbarment proceedings against him within 14 days of the viral clip. 6 of his current high-profile clients, including a Wall Street executive and 2 real estate moguls, fired him within 10 days, terrified of being publicly associated with a man now under federal investigation. The legendary Park Avenue law firm of Whitmore, Sterling and Associates, which had stood for 32 years and employed 147 attorneys, dissolved completely within just 6 weeks. Senior partners fled to other firms, junior associates resigned overnight, and the receptionist who had worked the front desk for 19 years walked out one Friday afternoon and never came back. The federal investigation that Judge Judy had personally triggered uncovered a corruption network so vast it shocked even seasoned FBI agents. Richard Whitmore had bribed at least 2 sitting judges, 4 police officers, and 11 court clerks across 3 different states. He had laundered money through 3 shell companies. He had paid off witnesses in at least 19 separate criminal cases over the past decade. He was eventually indicted on 23 federal counts, including violations of the RICO Act, witness tampering, bribery of public officials, and conspiracy to obstruct justice across multiple jurisdictions. He faced a maximum combined sentence of 47 years in federal prison. His $11 million Park Avenue penthouse was seized as part of asset forfeiture proceedings. The man who had spent 30 years devouring judges for breakfast was now eating cold prison food off a plastic tray in a federal holding facility, awaiting a trial he could no longer afford to fight. Sarah Chen's life transformed in ways she had never dared to dream. With the GoFundMe money, she paid off every debt, bought a modest, reliable car, and put down a payment on a small house in a safer Queens neighborhood where Lily and Grace could finally walk to school without fear. She was featured on 3 morning shows but refused every job offer, returning to her overnight nursing shifts because, as she said, "My patients still need me." She quietly donated $50,000 to a legal defense fund for victims of wealthy hit-and-run drivers, with Marcus Davis's family included as the first beneficiaries. The two families became close friends. The case became a Harvard Law School study on judicial courage. 14 states introduced Sarah Chin laws tightening hit-and-run penalties, and Judge Judy received the American Bar Association Lifetime Service Award. The clip of Madison Whitmore being led away in handcuffs has now been watched over 240 million times, but the most powerful moment is not her collapse. It is the quiet dignity on Sarah Chen's face when she finally realized justice was for people like her too. Money buys lawyers, lawyers buy delays, but none of it buys the truth forever. Every Madison eventually walks into the wrong courtroom on the wrong day, and on that day, no last name is bigger than the truth. If this story moved you, smash that like button right now. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another moment when entitled bullies face real consequences. Comment below and share this video with someone who needs to remember, in Judge Judy's courtroom and in life, respect is not optional, and neither are the consequences of forgetting that.